Next, from the state Senate in Springfield, Senate Bill 957, a bill which grants temporary driver's licenses for Illinois' illegal immigrants, is debated. This runs about 1 hour.
Senator Milner on floor amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Jeff, thank you for all you've done over the years. We appreciate seeing you up there and everything you've done with us and for us. So, that said, Senate Amendment, Floor Amendment 3 makes a temporary visitor's driver's license invalid if the holder is unable to provide proof of liability insurance upon request of a law enforcement officer. The holder would then have committed a violation of Section 6-101 of the Illinois Vehicle Code, which requires you to have a valid driver's license with a petty offense penalty. And so what we're trying to do is, of course, train, license, and mandate insurance, and there's a way to mandate it to have a valid driver's license with you. So,
Thank you, Senator Milner. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on floor amendment number 3? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Opposed, nay. Pending the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Mr. Secretary, are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
No further amendments reported.
Third reading. Now, on the order of third reading, Senate Bill 957. Mr. Secretary, please read the bill.
Senate Bill 957, an act concerning transportation. Third reading of the bill.
President Cullerton on Senate Bill 957.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. This piece of legislation would allow for undocumented immigrants the opportunity to apply for a temporary visitor's driver's license. Currently in Illinois, if you do not have a Social Security number, even if you wanted to, you could not obtain an Illinois driver's license. However, we do have, and we've had for a number of years, the opportunity for certain category of folks to get a temporary visitor's driver's license. That would be if the individual can provide documentation issued by the current law would say someone issued by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services stating that that person is legally residing in the United States. This would be some people like students residing in the U.S. on a student visa. So we have taken this idea of this document that's currently being issued by the Secretary of State, and we wanted to add the category of undocumented immigrants. The reason for this is we have perhaps 250,000 undocumenteds in the state of Illinois who are eligible or of driver's age, many of whom, human nature being such as it is and the necessities of life being such as it is, are definitely driving. Unfortunately, there's also a good number of these drivers who not only are they not licensed, but they're also not without insurance. So allowing these immigrants the right to drive legally has been around for a number of years. The temporary visitor's driver's license that we talked about, currently about 15,000 of those are in circulation in Illinois. Now, I believe that many of you know I've been involved in the legislature for a long time, but also highway safety. I was the first sponsor of many, many years ago of the passenger, the seatbelt law back in 1984, and even the requiring people to have children in car seats in 1982. And we've had a tremendous drop in our fatalities ever since then. And it seems to me it makes sense if we have so many folks here in Illinois who are driving a vehicle. We're not even asking them to take a vision test. We're not asking them to take a driver's test. And we're not certain that they would even have insurance. So the document that would be issued is, however, distinct from a driver's license that you and I would have. It is not something that will allow them to use to get on an airplane or to purchase a weapon. It has a unique appearance. It has a different color. It's valid for 3 years. Cannot be used for commercial driving purposes. People have to pay for it. It would only say that they have the ability to use our roadways. It seems to me that if you're involved in a car crash and someone hits you and they don't have insurance, you would, even if they're undocumented, you would prefer that they would have taken a test to be able to drive that vehicle, and you would prefer that they would have insurance so that you won't be out money. And so that's why I think this is such an important issue. It's a highway safety measure. I think it's something that we've come up with a very good compromise with the fact that it's not a driver's license like everyone else's. I really appreciate bipartisan support that we have received in this effort, and I would ask you all to please vote for it. In the meantime, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Leader Redonio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to speak to the bill.
The bill.
This, as you know, is not by any means a new issue. It's been around here for at least 5 years, if not longer than that. It tends to be a very emotional issue, so I hope we can approach it by taking as much emotion out of it as possible. I don't think there really is a perfect solution to the predicament that we're in collectively, and that is we do have at least 250,000 undocumented individuals living, working, going to school with us. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten any help from the federal government in clarifying their status, which is clearly what needs to happen. But with respect to the one activity of driving, I do think we've come up with a reasonable compromise in this bill. As the Senate President stated, is an attempt to separate out the driving function and address that and that only. This bill is different than other states who have tried it. Some states have had less success with it than others. But I will tell you, in the discussion over the 5 years, there has been a true effort to address legitimate concerns with other types of driver's licenses that other states have dealt with. I really do believe that this is a fair and honest attempt to get more people to be tested, to know the rules of the road, let them know they need to have insurance, and the amendment that Senator Milner brought forth actually adds a little bit higher bar for undocumented drivers to be sure they do have insurance. Time will tell if it's effective, but I think that this is a very good faith effort to move forward with a public policy problem with a good public policy solution. So I would encourage people to vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Leader Munoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill.
Bill.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I stand and rise in strong support of the bill. And I can tell you, as a law enforcement officer, I was a little disappointed with the chiefs of police and the Illinois Sheriff's Association, mainly because I passed so many bills for them over the years. But when I talked to the chiefs of police and the director of the association, they're mixed. Some of the departments want to be for it, and others are going to take the position no matter what, unless you're a citizen. That's the only way you can obtain a driver's license. I think it's unfair. As a police officer, you want to have a person that's driving a vehicle with a valid driver's license and proof of insurance. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, not only do you and I pay extra money to our insurance and to all our constituents because somebody has to pay for that driver that's not insured that gets into an accident. Sure, your insurance says, well, I'll pay the deductible, but after a while, when this builds up throughout municipalities, throughout the state, we're paying for that. Here you have individuals. Granted, they're not citizens, but they're law-abiding citizens that they can be without being here. They're undocumented. They want to be doing the right thing. They want to drive legally. They want to have the insurance. They want to have a car. They have families. They go to school. And for most of you that don't know, the people are up here on the dais. Some of them are teachers, architects, engineers, lawyers, but they can't get board certified here. Maybe because of the language barrier, too, because the federal government hasn't opened it up for citizens or for them to be a resident. Well, we'll let the federal government deal with that. But what we can do here for them is let them drive legally. It's a good thing, safety measure. They have families, and most of all, they want to do the right thing. Look up in the dais, and it's just not the Latino community. It's Polish, Irish, Haitian, all across the board. Ladies and gentlemen, vote aye for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of the gentleman's legislation. We live in an imperfect world, an imperfect state. The fact of the matter is there is a cost to society when we have uninsured, untrained, and untested drivers. The fact of the matter is they are not going to self-deport. The federal government's not going to deport them. They are here. We have to try to find some resolution to this. This legislation goes a great deal in terms of improving past legislation in several ways. But the fact of the matter is this will allow for training, testing, and insurance. Many people don't have it. Therefore, I believe reducing insurance premiums on people who are paying that cost right now. Tens of thousands of people in this state get in accidents without insurance. There's a cost associated with that. There are fatal accidents that occur because people haven't been trained, tested in this regard. This opens that door. I do want to thank the sponsor. A concern that I had was as to what this could also be used for. The sponsor adopted language that I asked to be put on that says this cannot be used for identification purposes, which protects our security, I believe, from airports, the purchase of guns and ammunition, as well as protects the right to vote. So I stand in support of the gentleman's legislation, and I encourage others to do so as well.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Martinez.
Mr. President, and to the bill.
Bill.
Today I stand in very strong support. I've watched over the course of the years being here in the General Assembly on how this bill has been debated on issues. I'm very happy to see that the members of the other side of the aisle have joined us in something that's very important, because at the end of the day, this is about public safety. It's making sure that we identify those 250,000 folks that are out there driving at this moment without a license. When we talk about public safety, public road safety, we have to make sure that every individual who is driving our streets know the rules of the road, understand what the rules of the road are, and more important, I think it's a safety measure that our law enforcement need right now. They are out on the streets patrolling the highways, you know, on every day, 24/7, and it's important for them to be able to at least know who is driving, as opposed to locking somebody up right away because they don't have a driver's license. So I stand in very support. I want to thank all the community groups that sat hours and hours and hours over the course of the last almost 7 years that we've been at this, trying to make sure that we found the right language. And I am so happy today to know that all the input from the other side of the aisle was also put into this bill, because it's the right thing to do. We have to ensure that everyone driving out there has car insurance. There's just too many accidents that occur where people do not have insurance. This is another way of making sure that we have people insured so we can take care of these accidents and the liabilities that a lot of these traffic accidents cause. So I am very happy today to see that we're working together, that in a bipartisan fashion, that this bill has a bipartisan support, and more important, that we know that today we're going to be able to let the rest of the Illinois people know that we're taking every measure that we can to ensure that there is public safety out there on the roadways. So I want to commend the sponsor who took leadership of this bill and has made it, work in every way possible. And I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Chamber of the Senate. To the bill.
Bill.
I too join in strong support of this important legislation. As someone who's not affected by it, my family is from Puerto Rico, a commonwealth of this country since 1917 under the Jones Act, which actually made our community, our island, citizens. But they had a purpose of taking our men to the war. And the same thing with Guam and the Philippines. There was not one application, not one fingerprint, but there was an economic need to protect this country. And my father and many other men And I just came back from burying my dad, and I want to thank you all publicly for the love you have sent me. He's a World War II veteran, and he was a sergeant, and I'm very proud of him. And he just had a military burial in Melbourne Beach, Florida. But I also participated in Miami as a former felony parole agent when the Mario boat lift came from Cuba. Not with any kind of corrections, any connections, just a boat that arrived in Miami. Castro had emptied his prisons, he said, of all kind of individuals that, by the way, many of them today walk around in society. Some are being held in prisons in Louisiana without any kind of processing until today. But for the rest of us all, many, many have moved on into their lives since the 80s and are enjoying their lives in this country. And until we can find a stronger policy, I'd like to agree with some of my colleagues on the other side in terms of knowing what the value is to stand for. But I was there to have to try to process these men and women, not understanding, and especially being from Chicago, exactly how I felt about that. But it's very clear from a law enforcement standpoint when we have Lake County sheriffs like Mark Curran, who estimates 28% of inmates in the Lake County Jail are nonviolent, undocumented immigrants who do not have valid driver's license, just tying up police officers and resources. This is about having confidence in our ability to have a strong workforce and families who said, we will fit this mold. We will take the necessary steps to be able to get to work safely, to be able to take our children safely to school and to the medical centers if needed. But at the end of the day, we are afraid. The only crime we might have created was looking for a job to feed our families. So I find a new day here in Illinois. I commend us all. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful afternoon to stand on this issue and to lead as and also to follow, as we've seen in New Mexico and in other states that are experimenting and knowing that we can reduce our uninsured motor costs as we continue to pick up the tab. But now this bill seems to have brought both sides together, and I'm just so proud that I was able to return in time to cast my yes vote, and I would pray that in the goodness of America and the goodness of Illinois, that we know as state police are very cognizant of who's going to be on the highways, and the more folks we can record to know who is driving next to us and our families will be a plus. And as we move forward in this protracted process, we can supervise this. We can have a fiscalization of this process. So with that, I would pray that we would see a humane vote here today, and one that will also create a stronger economic foothold here in Illinois by voting yes on the gentleman's legislation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Sandoval.
To the bill, Mr. President.
Bill.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I rise today as many of us have risen before for many years. In fact, 14 years ago, this bill in another form was introduced by our former colleague, Senator Miguel del Valle. In 2007, another form of this bill was introduced by members of primarily the Latino caucus of the Senate, Senator Martinez, Senator Munoz, Senator Delgado, and myself, with the support of many of my colleagues in this chamber. Today, there's a saying in many of our Mexican homes que dice, más vale tarde que nunca. It's better late than never. I know that some of the English-only papers may need a translator, but so I will try my best.
Be nice, Marty.
We have made, it has been, and I know of no other sponsor than the Illinois Senate President, Juan Cullerton, to be the primary sponsor of this piece of legislation today. The proud son of immigrant parents from Ireland, in the same spirit of the former sponsors of similar legislation over the last 14 years. This man has made a career. The hallmark of his leadership has centered and focused in big part to public safety of our highways, the protection of children, working families, seniors on the roads of the state of Illinois. In fact, over my last 5-6 years as chairman of the Illinois Senate Transportation Committee, with the support of many of you on this side of the aisle, as well as that side of the aisle, in a very bipartisan way. We have had a history, all of us, of protecting and making our highways better and safer for all the residents. We have passed and proposed laws that ban cell phone use on our highways. We have passed ban on texting while driving. We have banned the use of cell phones in school zones and in construction zones. This Illinois Senate, in a very bipartisan way and fashion, has demonstrated our commitment to keeping our roadways and our highways safe. We are not Johnny-come-lately to the issue of protecting people, all people of the state of Illinois. I stand today in reluctance to a certain extent, although supportive of this piece of legislation, because this is not the perfect way of protecting our highways. It is not the perfect way to be providing temporary driver's licenses to the undocumented. It should be a permanent driver's license for the undocumented residents of the state of Illinois, because they pay taxes, they pay mortgages, they support many of our public funds used for Social Security purposes, for Medicare purposes, for Medicaid purposes. They have been, many of them, law-abiding residents of this great state. So I am reluctant in the shape and the form of the bill that we are going to vote on in a few minutes. I also want to point out that I am reluctant because we shouldn't be here passing this bill here today. There's no need for this bill to be voted on today because, you know, let me remind you, this is a federal issue. This is an issue that our Congress has failed the people of Illinois. This is an issue that my congressman, Luis Gutierrez, for the 19 years as a federal congressman, has failed the people of Illinois. He has failed my community. The Mexican residents in my community have been failed by his leadership, his lack of leadership, and the leadership of Congress to do what's right and pass immigration reform. If they were to spend more time in trying to protect and enhance the quality of life of the people of Illinois and end the bickering and the lack of bipartisanship, we would not have to vote on laws like this today. I take this opportunity on calling on my congressman of the 4th Congressional District, Luis Gutierrez, of 19 years, and the rest of Congress and the President of the United States to get with the program of the undocumented residents who have been law-abiding and contributing people of this great state and of this country. We in the Illinois Senate have a responsibility, and we've taken it very serious. Once again, when the undocumented residents needed coverage when it came to in-state tuition, it was the Illinois Senate that provided the net. When it came to protection for health care, kid care for the undocumented, and family care for the undocumented, it was the Illinois Senate that provided the web for our people. And now, when it came to providing a path to citizenship, it was again the Illinois Senate through the New Americans Initiative that have invested over $3 million a year for the last 9 years to provide a pathship to citizenship for the undocumented residents of Illinois. Congress has failed the people of Illinois. Congress has failed the undocumented residents of the people of Illinois. The Illinois Senate has been the responsible body, and we have done it in a very bipartisan way. This is not a perfect bill, pero más vale tarde que nunca. I ask a favorable vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Senator Lausen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, this legislation is not about student visas, and it's not about temporary visitors. in all of our oaths of office, we solemnly swear that we will support the Constitution of the United States and uphold its laws and the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and that we will faithfully discharge our duties of the office of State Senator. Equal protection under the law and under the Constitution certainly goes hand in hand with equal responsibility to follow the law. I am in favor of legal immigration, but oppose illegal immigration. I also support efforts by the national government to finally and equitably solve the illegal immigration problem in America. However, we have the cart before the horse in the case of granting additional legal privileges to people already breaking our country's law. The national government should act first, which then paves the way for this action. And when folks say to us, it's only one law, the immigration law, that's being broken, that is simply not accurate for tens of thousands of people who are also employed illegally. Many of them driving to work, therefore breaking the traffic laws. Now we're expected to believe that folks who are already breaking the immigration law, the employment law, the traffic laws, are now going to follow the insurance law. I'd just like to say that 40 years ago, John F. Kennedy cautioned us that full confidence in the integrity of American law is essential. He said, "Our nation is founded on the principle that observance of the law is the eternal safeguard of liberty, and defiance of the law, in this case immigration law, is the surest road to tyranny. Even among law-abiding men, few laws are universally loved, but they are uniformly respected and resisted. Americans are free, in short, to disagree with the law, but not to disobey it. For no man, however prominent and powerful, and no mob, however unruly and boisterous, is entitled to defy a court of law. Therefore, observance of the law is the ground upon which we pitch our tent for domestic tranquility and social peace." I ask for a no vote on this legislation.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Severson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question for the sponsor.
He indicates he'll yield. Senator Severson.
Senator, can you help me understand my understanding is under this legislation, no criminal background checks are part of that, but previous traffic violations are taken into consideration when it comes to issuing these licenses?
President Cullerton.
My understanding is that the Secretary of State is going to issue these temporary visitors' driver's licenses. And I want to thank the Secretary, by the way, in helping us draft the legislation so that it can be implemented, because his office is the one that has to implement it. You have to show that you are who you are when you come to get your temporary visitor's driver's license. So you'll have to show documents like a passport from the country that you were born in, or anything issued from the government, like from the consul's office. Then, in addition to that, the Secretary of State will require proof that you've been in the state for 1 year. So we're not going to be having folks come here for the purpose of just getting this license. So they would need various documents that would determine, to prove the identity. Also, they're going to issue these centrally so that they're going to be able to take a photograph of the person applying. If that, they can tell from double checking that photograph with any previous illegal application for a driver's license that that same person might have made, and then that person would be identified and would be charged with that offense. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't know that there's going to be any checking of someone's prior record because they wouldn't have had a license before that, if that answers your question.
Senator Severson.
Well, no, I guess it doesn't totally answer that. When you go to renew your license, whether you have a license now or not, when you go to renew your license, if you've been issued a previous violation for speeding or driving without insurance or driving without a license, you're issued then a ticket and you pay a fine. If that is not paid, then my understanding is you can't renew your license. In this case, if someone is driving illegally and they are stopped for speeding or for any other violation, if they're stopped, they are issued a driver's license number for court purposes, and then they're given a ticket that they have to pay. If those tickets then are not paid, then under this scenario then, will those driver's license still be issued? So will they do a background check with the Secretary of State's office if there are violations or tickets or fines that are still owed to be paid?
I don't know. I would tell you that this is a Senate bill. I specifically made it a Senate bill, not to amend a House bill. I hope it goes to the House, and I will follow up with that specific question and make sure that that answer is provided if the bill does end up going to the House.
Senator Severson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and for your time in discussing this issue. I guess what I don't want to have, and I appreciate your willingness to look into this, is a procedure in place where someone can, where those who currently are licensed would have a stricter regulations or stricter laws than those who are applying for these new cards. And so where anyone in this room had previous ticket violations would not get their license renewed, that we would want to make sure that if these others had violations or monies owed or tickets or court appearances that they hadn't done yet, that they also would not be allowed to be issued this new license. If that makes sense, you're nodding your head, maybe I'm jogging a memory on something.
President Cullerton.
No, I agree with you. I just haven't had a specific conversation about that with the Secretary of State's office. It would make all the sense in the world when they're checking residency, they're checking whether they are who they are. If they had some record, I know that if they had a record of illegally trying to apply for a driver's license before, then they would be arrested for that. But if they were issued a ticket when they didn't have a driver's license and they didn't pay a fine, the Secretary of State has all those records, and I'm virtually certain that they would not issue the temporary visitor's driver's license because of that until those were paid.
Chris Brooks from WICS-TV seeks permission to videotape today's proceedings. Seeing no objection, leave is granted. Is there any further discussion? Senator Jacobs.
Question, sponsor.
He indicates he'll yield. Senator Jacobs.
Mr. President, is it your point that everybody who drives a car should be licensed?
President Cullerton.
Tested and insured and have a license.
Senator Jacobs.
Is then at the end of the day is that we should be licensed, these people should be licensed, and they should be properly insured before they go on the road, and that this is going to make us safer than if we didn't do it. Is that correct?
President Cullerton.
Yes.
Senator Jacobs.
Would it be wrong to assume that people are going to drive irregardless if they have a license? So in effect, let's just let them have a license. Is that the point?
President Cullerton.
I think we've seen from experience that folks, even if their license is suspended in Illinois, a good percentage of those folks go out and drive anyway. So I'm using that experience to assume that the 250,000 undocumented that are here, out of necessity in many cases, are out driving, but they do not have a license, they haven't been tested, they don't have insurance necessarily, and that's why I think this is a time to do this.
Senator Jacobs.
One final question. Mr. President, I'm going to ask the question that my Republican colleagues may have asked before election that are not asking now. And that is, how do I as a lawmaker support a bill that gives undocumented workers the right to drive? Doesn't this in effect flaunt the law and make the law meaningless?
President Cullerton.
Well, Senator, let me say that there might other people might have different motivations to support this bill. When I first talked to the immigration rights groups about this bill, I told them that my interest was really a selfish one for the citizens of the state of Illinois who are driving on our highways, who are being potentially jeopardized by so many undocumented folks who don't have a license, haven't been tested, might not know how to drive, might not have insurance. And from a selfish point of view, I think we should protect ourselves by asking them to get a license, by requiring them to get a license. So I don't view it as a reward for illegal activity. I don't think that's our jurisdiction. We have said in the debate here, it has come out, it's not our decision to decide what's going to happen to the 12 million plus undocumented folks in the United States. That's not for us to decide, that's the federal government to decide. But we are responsible for our roadways. And we have an obligation to our citizens to make them safe. We have an obligation to try to save lives. And that's what we're doing by passing this bill. So that's what I would say to those folks who would say you're somehow rewarding illegal activity. We're not, in my opinion. We're letting that decision be made by another lawmakers, and we're taking care of what we're supposed to take care of in Illinois.
Senator Jacobs.
In closing, I would just like to say that across the aisle, one of my Republican friends mentioned the President John F. Kennedy, a great Democrat patron. And in his book, A Nation of Immigrants, he also said immigrant policy should be generous, it should be fair, and it should be flexible. I agree with Senator Sandoval in that this bill is not a perfect bill. And I wish I could vote on both sides of this bill. But at the end of the day, we have to vote on one side of it. And I'm going to become very flexible on this vote.
Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Milner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to address this bill from both my past experience, 30-plus years experience as a law enforcement officer, and my current experience as a state legislator. And I'm telling you, by looking at all the facts of this case, the bottom line here is, and looking at, yes, I have to say, I took the Constitution, the oath, and I believe in my oath. I believe in it. I did that for over 40 years now. And so this is important to me to make sure it's done correctly. As a matter of status, will this grant illegal immigrants any additional status other than a driving privilege? No, it won't. And in fact, the bottom line here today for me is that we want people, all people in our state, to obey the law. So we have people driving in our state. They're going to drive today, they're going to drive tomorrow. We need to provide the opportunity to obey the law. This does that. It doesn't grant anything else. We talk about the federal government wouldn't be for this. Well, I disagree, because in the Real ID Act, the federal Real ID Act, if you look at that, this particular piece of legislation complies with that. It does, because it says it requires that any driving documents that a state issues to anyone without lawful immigration status must be visually distinct from regular licenses and must state on their face that they're not valid for identification purposes. So you know what, folks? You cannot use this to vote. You cannot use this to get on an airplane. You cannot use this for any form of identification except to the police officer that stops you and asks for your license. We want our people to obey our traffic laws, so I believe that Senate Bill 957 actually goes beyond that and protects against fraud and abuse. And it does that in a number of ways. This will, folks, I really believe, from my heart, will improve highway safety for all of our motorists and to make sure that everyone on our roads trained, tested, licensed, and insured. You just can't walk in there and get one of these. Most of us, we go to the Secretary of State's office, we get in there, we take the test, whether it's the written test and the driving test, they take our photograph, they hand us a license. It doesn't happen with this particular piece of legislation. There's only a few places that will accept it. And when you apply, you have to have documentation. You have to prove that you lived in Illinois for at least a year. Now, they're going to look at everything from whether it's credit card bills, mortgage payments, rental payments, mail that goes to your house with your name on it to make sure it's there for a year. They'll make that decision. They're going to do a facial recognition photograph. Now, folks, most people aren't aware of how this works, but when you take that photograph, it really does work. If I take my photograph here in Springfield and I apply under a different name up in Chicago, it will immediately determine it's the same guy. Even if I grow a beard, it doesn't matter. It's facial recognition, so we have that protection. We're verifying these documents. They live here in a year. They look different than other regular driver's licenses. And again, it makes sure they follow the rules. The amendment we just accepted was my amendment that said that if they get stopped on the street and they don't have insurance. Now, if you get stopped and you don't have insurance, the police officer writes you a ticket, no valid insurance. You got to go to court and prove it. If we issue one of these and they get stopped, it's a non-valid driver's license, no valid DL. And they get a ticket for no insurance, and one for not having a valid driver's license. This goes well beyond all those things. The safety that we're concerned about is evident. It was written into this bill. It's good language. Certainly, could we go further and do more with people? We probably could. But looking at all of this together, the bottom line is highway safety. The bottom line is getting people insured. The bottom line is getting people the training, tested, and licensed. Let's get safety out on the street, not having people drive willy-nilly. What do we want to do, folks? We want everybody who's in our state to make sure they're obeying the law. And remember this, too. There could be people who are getting this temporary driving license who may be undocumented today, but they're going through a process to become documented. I just want the people who are driving our roads to drive safely and have a driving license and insurance. That's the bottom line, and I truly urge and I vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker, Senator Raul.
It's Senator Raul. As the last speaker of the Latino caucus, I have to agree with Senator Munoz that the face of an immigrant is not only the Latino community. The face of the immigrant looks like every member in this chamber. We are a nation of immigrants. I, maybe more directly than some of you, I'm a first-generation child of Haitian immigrants. And I was speaking to my mother earlier today, and she was reciting to me the complications that she had with her immigration status when she first came here. So it's by fortuity that I stand before you as a citizen of this great country of ours. I just came back from New York this morning, where I was visiting with my sister, who runs and has run for the last 20 years an organization called Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees. And she started running the organization 20 years ago after she spent time in Guantanamo Bay as a translator for Haitians who had been interdicted as they were trying to flee persecution, many who were repatriated. And previous speaker talked about equitable application of our immigration laws. Let's not lie to ourselves. There's never been any such thing in this country. So by fortuity, Some people have legal immigration status in our country, and some people don't. I can take you to the Haitian community in Florida, and they can point to other communities that have gotten preferential treatment with regards to how immigration laws are applied. My first job out of college, I worked for a packaging company that packaged for McDonald's, and I was taken to a sugar refinery in Savannah, Georgia. And I was told that we go get workers from Haiti because there's no equipment that allows us to get the sugar, and there are no workers here that will do the work. And so we go get our workers from Haiti, and then we take them back. Now, I don't think they were filing immigration papers when they were going to get those workers. And we want to pretend like we don't rely on a day-to-day basis, every person in this room, on the work of undocumented immigrants. We do, whether it's in the restaurants, whether it's domestic workers, whether it's in manufacturing facilities, wherever it may be, whether it's in construction, we do rely upon it. And we can't pretend that we don't. And we can't pretend that these people don't contribute to our economy, because they do. And to a dear friend of mine on the other side of the aisle, and I think the minorities leader said it right, the federal government has not done its part on this, and they've fallen short. I wouldn't quite say it like the good senator from the Southwest side, but he had some points in there. The federal government has fallen short, but we have to separate that apart from this safety measure that we're dealing with here. We are a state legislature. We can urge, but we cannot pass immigration reform in this chamber. But we can put in place a safety measure that recognizes that there are 250,000 people here in our great state, many of whom contribute to our economy, many of whom work hard, and we rely on their work. And so this is a small measure to recognize that we need to protect ourselves while recognizing that these people are making a contribution to our economy. So I urge an aye vote.
President Cullerton to close.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Just to sum up the arguments, first of all, I once again want to thank the Secretary of State for helping us draft this legislation so that we know that it'll work when it becomes law. I also want to thank Senator Milner for the amendment, which highlights the fact that we really want to emphasize the fact that we want insurance to be purchased by folks who will get this new license. To make it very clear, it's been stated before, we don't do immigration law here. I'm very hopeful now that the election's over that the Congress will go back and deal with the issue of immigration at the federal level. But while they're doing that, we have a responsibility for our roadways. And we acknowledge that many of these documented immigrants are driving now, and it's unsafe. Driving is a privilege, but there's also obligations that come with it. An obligation to take a vision test, an obligation to take a road test, an obligation to purchase insurance. We will definitely save lives by passing this bill. To me, when people have asked me what's the most important bill you've passed in the 34 years I've been here, I say it's the highway safety bills, because all of us can sit here and actually press a green button, and as a result of that, lives will be saved. The same thing will happen with this bill. Please press the green button and vote aye.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 957 pass? All those in favor will vote aye, opposed nay, and the voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Mr. Secretary, please take the record. On that question, there are 41 voting aye, 14 voting nay, 1 voting present. Senate Bill 957, having received the required constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed. Felicitaciones.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.